Chris, Jon, welcome to Validated.
Thanks for having us, Austin.
Great to be here.
Yeah. So Chris, you are the founder of Dialect. Jon, you run ecosystem engineering at the Solana Foundation, and we're here to talk about blinks. So I want to start out with a little bit because this thing took, I'd say, as much as a product feature on a blockchain can take the internet by storm, this kind of took the internet a little bit by storm when it launched. So Chris, I want to start out, what are blinks? How do they work? We've all seen this great UX on Twitter. What's actually going on there?
Yeah, so thanks for having us, Austin. To start, I would say actions and blinks are a way to share Solana everywhere. And so what they do is they allow you to share more than just a link or a link preview. You can put inside of links, and actually blink is short for blockchain link. And when you build actions and blinks, you can encode into your link more than a link preview, and you can actually have it unfurl with more than the image, title, description. You actually have actions that users can take directly from the blink. And so that can be swapping tokens, it can be donating, it can be voting on governance, other kinds of SocialFi use cases. And what we launched was bringing those experiences directly into crypto Twitter. And it's powered, and we can probably get into this over the course of the conversation, but it's powered by an integration directly into your favorite Chrome extension wallets. So we're talking Phantom, Backpack, Solflare, and a growing list of wallets such as OKX and Bybit.
So, Jon, I want to talk a little bit about how these things came about, because we've been talking about this, and you've been tweeting about this for a while, and you said a lot of the stuff that's actually powering blinks and actions, it's not necessarily new technology, it's a new presentation format. So where'd the idea for this stuff originally come from?
Yeah, this has been a fascinating journey. It got to market pretty quickly, but I think it's one of those things where you pay someone for how much experience they have. And this thing has actually been around for a couple of years now. The origins are actually in the Solana Pay specification. Solana Pay originally was developed as a mechanism to allow for a mobile wallet to, do a transaction at, say, a point of sale. It would do that by, present a QR code, you scan it with the mobile wallet, it has some parameters around whatever you're about to do. That quickly got expanded by Jordan Sexton and a group of folks working on that to allow for arbitrary transactions to be invoked. And instead of embedding the actual transaction in the URL, what it would embed is an API. Hit that API with the wallet's public key, return back the serialized transaction. Now, people ended up using this primarily for payments.
Right.
The sort of NFT-based loyalty flow only works through this mechanism.
This is like the classic Solana Pay thing where you scan a QR code from a register and it fills in the dollar amount that I'm supposed to pay for my coffee.
Absolutely. But in this case, you could even extend it to do something like deliver a digital asset as part of that. So pay $5 for, one more stamp in your NFT or something like that. But, and even in the documentation, you can see there's a clause that says, hey, you can use this for more than just payments. But because it was called Solana Pay Transaction Request, a lot of people kind of slept on this particular use case of having this API. Over the course of the last couple of years, people have used it in different ways, maybe more generalized. Phantom used it for NFT shortcuts. Dialect used it for smart messages. And that sort of had, put at least the seeds for the basis through which we were getting to the action specification itself. Earlier this year, what we did is that I was thinking about Solana Pay, how to make it more accessible, how to use it in different ways. And with the transaction request in particular, I was thinking about, okay, I think we need to give it a new name because just baseline, people are only using it for payments. And as a result of doing that, I was thinking about, okay, if it's a QR code, that means it's a string, it's a set of characters. So if we can do all that and you can express it as a URL, then you can actually share it more easily. And if you can effectively embed the source of a transaction into a URL and you can share that, that's a great place to start. And that's effectively where we started. Earlier this year, I was like, hey, talk to Chris. I was like, have an interesting idea. Here's these URLs. You're using them for smart messages. What if we just, canonicalize the URLs that we end up sharing around? And it's a reasonable idea. I think it started off really interestingly, but it wasn't incredibly compelling to begin with. It was just a mechanism. In the process of actually sharing that idea and, seeing what other people thought of it, talked with On from Super Team. And he didn't, he picked on it. He's like, oh, this is cool. 2 days later comes back to me and says like, hey, what if you like unfurled it? I'm like, well, yeah, that you could do that, but you would need an extension. But good luck with that. No one's going to install an extension except for the millions of people who use these Chrome extension wallets.
Right, except we all have extensions. That's like how you interact with blockchain, for better or for worse.
For better or for worse. And the result of that was like me, and this was at Token 2049 Dubai, talking to literally everyone at this party or whatever it is, and getting like excited, like, okay, found something interesting. And since that point, we just had to get this into people's hands. It was obvious.
Yeah, I remember when Jon reached out to me, he messaged me. I was on a call. I don't remember what the call was at this point, but Jon messaged me. He's like, I have an idea. And he mentioned the Chrome extension hack. And I was like, this is brilliant. And I was so distracted on the call. I had to like apologize to the person I was it was like immediate. We just knew this was the way to go. And to Jon's point, we'd been building things like this for, we came up with the idea for the smart message, which is, I think, spiritually a very like similar predecessor. We came up with it in January of 2022, almost immediately and serendipitously connected with Jordan Sexton at Solana Labs, now Anza. And we built the smart message. Like that was just an idea. And when he launched transaction requests with Solana Pay, we built the smart message on top of that tech because like the shoe fit. And so it's been like a great journey for us too. Like I think now that we're in a very different place in the market and the cycles, being able to build developer tools again is what we love to do.
Yeah, it's funny because like Chrome extensions have been injecting stuff into websites for decades at this point. Like I remember like back in 2011, the buffer extension would add these little like social media tags to like the Twitter feed, and like Honey extension does that with like, oh, this coupon code and stuff.
Yeah,
but like
my credit card does the same thing today. That's right.
Yeah, but like no one had thought of until this point, like what if we could actually use all of this client-side rendering in the extension to actually start bringing blockchain transactions into areas that are currently protected by kind of the walled garden. And it's sort of funny because like there's been such a push in crypto for so long of like crypto needs to go mobile. We really need to go mobile with this stuff. But like this was only possible because like the open and free web is the thing that this is all built on.
Yeah, that's really well put. And there's a thing that I've heard so many times when Y Combinator funds a lot of SaaS companies, and something I don't know if they're still saying it, but there was this common phrase of like, oh, you want to build a productivity app? Don't build the app, build the Chrome extension to add a feature to Google Sheets as your go-to-market.
Right.
And so it's this superpower of Chrome extensions that's been hiding in plain sight, and I just think less adopted. When we launched, we did hear anecdotally of some teams that had done some stuff with this, but I think how you go to market, how you package it, how you launch it, who you launch it with, all has a really big impact on the success of the tech.
Yeah. So what was that like process like, right? To go from like, hey, we're on a call, here's this cool idea. A few months later, it's live and launched out into the world. Like crypto is famous for narrative-driven, not even product development, like white paper development. But this was something that seemed to go from like idea phase to product phase, like pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's I hadn't really thought about it like as a narrative. I don't know. I don't think about that like approach to how we build stuff. But I think it was important for us to do two things in particular. One was to figure out what the actual specification was, like outline what this thing does and what it's capable of. And fortunately for us, that work was already done. It's the very first version of the action spec is identical to the Solana Pay transaction request spec. It has evolved since then, but at the very beginning, it was like, good, let's start with this. Let's work with Dialect to implement an SDK and like see if we can actually build a proof of concept. And then from there, it was really figuring out, okay, now we need to have conversations with wallets, and we need to figure out who's actually going to build these APIs.
Yeah.
But fortunately, it's like every single protocol in Solana has something that they can do with this. And I think that made it easy to find the right folks to build APIs.
Yeah, I think part of the at Dialect, we love to ship things really quickly. And we also like to ship with partners. And so obviously collaborating with Solana was it was just a fantastic opportunity. But as we were lining up okay, which wallets are going to participate in the launch? And then we call them actions providers, the Jupiters, Sanctums, Tensors of the world, building the actions that the wallets then render on Twitter. We love to ship with launch partners. And so our goal was something like 5 to 10 actions providers, at least one wallet. And I think it was fantastic. But I think part of the reason why it happened so quickly, beyond just sort of like engineering and partnerships and codifying the spec, is that like we had 2 years of the sort of experimentation and other tests at going to market with this technology. So I think we just had a really clear sense of what was the cone of the parameter space that we were going to pursue.
Yeah.
Because we tried so many things already. Like the technology's been around for like 2.5 years. And I think that's why the Chrome extension thing was just this like lightning bolt. It was immediately obvious because we'd been thinking about it for a couple of years already.
Yeah, a lot of the times people sort of assume like, oh, Solana Foundation, you can just tell the ecosystem to adopt something and they'll do it. And like, we have truly no power to tell anyone to do anything. So one of the things I think I was surprised by, I think a lot of people were surprised by, was how quickly blinks and actions were adopted, not just on the application side, which sure, once the product exists, it's pretty easy to say, all right, the iPad is now out, I should ship an iPad app. But like the actual process of the wallet saying like, we're going to put this right on the top of our roadmap and product development. How did that come about? What were those conversations like? Because I know there's a lot of other conversations that Jon and I have had with wallets over the years where we're like, hey, have you heard of token extensions? And they're like, maybe. So like, what about Blinks was so compelling that they were willing to put this at the top of the integration list?
I think, honestly, it took a video. Like, as many times as I could explain this, even with the URLs, it was like, okay, this seems like a cool idea. But yeah, like ultimately not super interesting. Once you had the first video, and I remember having these like, and I stressed this to Chris, like, give me a video that I can do. And eventually I just screen recorded one of the initial developer builds. And that is the light when someone's like, oh, that's what you meant? That's what this is? And then suddenly just everything blows up from there. And having these conversations with wallets that ultimately have that ability to sign and send and preview those transactions, they're the important one. And to show them now you can provide this new capability that's deeply embedded in the application experience, in this case, like X, inside of in the browser, it was amazing. Like, for folks like Armani, it didn't take long. Like, I jumped on a call with them for like 5 minutes, and it was like, all right, like, good to go.
I really think like crypto has 2 superpowers, at least 2 that I really care about. There's the obvious one that we all know, which is like, well, it's not that obvious because I think we're still early innings in like the broader world, but like it's the open, permissionless financial systems.
Yeah.
The other one is this ability to prove who you are everywhere all the time. It's the cryptographic key pair, like the wallet in the key pair sense. And that's what we've been going after at Dialect for a long time. And I think we've seen other shots on goal from other teams, sometimes in other ecosystems. But I fundamentally believe there's this really deep sort of like developer demand for this kind of experience. The ability to like, I like to say like unfurl your product and make experiences shareable. And so just the rallying, like once people saw it, it's just this thing that like we've been going after for a couple of years at Dialect. And I've seen in so many calls, so many conversations, when that light bulb clicks for a developer or a team, founder, and it's really exciting to see.
It's interesting because it's probably the closest thing we've seen to like a progressive web app for crypto, right? Something that doesn't force you to go and install a new extension or download a new application in order to be able to get it, but it also isn't like on the website to enable it.
Yeah, I think the like key unlock is in Web 2, in the traditional internet, everybody's like rolling their own authentication. And so you have these walled gardens of like, what actual actions can I take with whatever like authentication token that I've got? I signed in with Google and all these different apps, but I have different tokens in each of them that only authenticate me with those services. And so the real unlock here is that like you can take an action from anywhere. You can do something on Jupyter directly from Twitter. You can basically mix and match. And so that then makes it possible to build frameworks. Like once you have the authentication, you can then build these frameworks for these hyper like portable bite-sized experiences. Without that, it's not really worth it because then you've got the authentication layers broken.
I wanted to add a couple things there too. I think you mentioned earlier, like, why haven't we seen this with a Chrome extension? And it's very much, I want to add on to that, is like, it's the authentication, but ultimately the state itself is just completely fragmented. But with blockchain, this is like an only possible on blockchain type moment where because all of these different protocols and dApps ultimately use the blockchain as their source of truth, and the message serialization, consensus, all that sort of stuff has been figured out, the same API that allows you to do a payment that maybe, I don't know, like a Shopify would want to be able to do is the same API that would allow you to vote on governance. It's the same API that lets you play a game. So you combine all of those and you say like, look, we don't need the permission of the website. All we need is to be able to work on top of a URL. And now you can break blockchain applications out of the corner of the internet that has this connect wallet scheme and push it to every edge of the internet.
Yeah, talk a little bit more about that, because when these launched, my DMs were flooded with people saying, how'd you get Elon to integrate Blinks? Yeah. And of course, the coup here is you didn't.
Yeah.
So how did that work?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, like extensions do have view of everything that you see in DOM. That's the same reason why 1Password can just inject a password in the right place. They're looking for things in the HTML and doing stuff. They're injecting JavaScript. That's how they render that little icon that says, hey, you should open up, that application. So same thing, ultimately, the extension is looking for URLs that otherwise adhere to the action specification, and in the context where there would be a link preview. So when you paste a link into a tweet and it shows like, hey, there's this Open Graph card, it can go ahead and replace that with the thing, some image and some metadata, but also the actions that you can take on the other side of it. Ultimately, the blockchain becomes the source of truth anyway for the dApp or the application, and the wallet's the one that sends and propagates the information. So the combination of all those things allows you to effectively inject this in any surface at any time for any website that can display a URL, which is every single one of them.
So today, the UI module that's most used and most built out is the one for Twitter or X. What was the sort of choice like to choose that as kind of that first launch platform, and how do folks expand from there?
I mean, part of this was just focus. Like ultimately, you want to find the platform where as many folks are going to be engaged as possible. In crypto Twitter, again, for better or for worse, it is Twitter, right?
Yeah.
It's in the name. And so we knew that, for a developer primitive that we thought was going to need to grow incrementally over time, that was the place where you could get the right captive audience of folks that really wanted to see something interesting. But we certainly don't see it stopping there. And we think that there is going to be different experiences on places like Facebook and Wikipedia and LinkedIn and stuff like that. And even if it's just as bare bones as being able to like hover over, a link and then having it unfurl into things that you can do with it, even that modality allows you to think about what it might look like as a result of an LLM response, right?
Yeah.
So now your surfaces get really interesting, but those surfaces and the overlap between crypto native audiences, pretty minimal right now. Crypto Twitter is like heavily overlapping, and so that was a good choice for us in the beginning.
Yeah, it's interesting though, like the model that I always thought was really under-adopted elsewhere on the web is like the thing on like Bloomberg or the Wall Street Journal where you could hover over where it says AAPL and it shows you like the chart of today of where it's going. And like you could totally see something along the lines of that with Blinks where you hover over it and there's not only more data that unfurls, but like an action that could be taken on
Just
that.
need tokenized equities and stocks. That's the only thing that's missing there.
Let's go.
Like Jon was saying a minute ago about we have this standardized database. That's what unlocks that, because it's really schemas. Like, what am I going to show when I hover on this? And that I think is also like this superpower of crypto. I think crypto Twitter made perfect sense because it's like the public square. It's like where we're all spending our time. And also to emphasize another thing Jon said about like focusing, like classic early work in a startup or on an early project, any go-to-market is like focus and do something incredible for a small group and then work outward in concentric circles. And I don't think we've even really solved the crypto Twitter arena yet, or platform service. So that we need better mobile support. We need better discoverability. We need enhanced and more immersive experiences on the Blinks themselves. Like there's a lot coming that's going to be in updates to the official specification. And so it's a little bit of a balancing act, but I think when you've got people as excited as they are, it's this incredible foundation to build and iterate with a community.
Nice. So walk me through like how this works from a developer saying, I want to build one of these, to a user actually clicking and taking an action on a Blink.
Yeah, I can give a high level here. And the way we like to describe it is actions and blinks are technically two different things. Nick Frostbutter says it really well. He says the action is the back end, the blink is the front end. What's really interesting here, just to give an example of like, let's say I'm a crypto researcher and I want to give people a donation link to be able to like fund my research. And I want to build that myself. There's also a growing list of things you can do without having to code. But let's say I want to build that myself. What you're building is an action, which is truly like a non-UI, no user interface.
Mm-hmm.
It's just an API, a service running out in the world, just like any other service. So it's like an HTTP server.
Yep.
And it conforms to a very simple specification. And all it does is return JSON, like it returns data in a specific schema. Just the data flow briefly is, so let's say I built that already. So I'm not developing any UIs, I'm not building any websites. And that's the other really remarkable thing about actions and blinks is you don't need a website or a mobile app to go to market with experiences, which we can talk a little bit about in a bit if you'd be interested. But I build this API, and sometimes you can get them up and running in just a few minutes or a few hours, like really easy to build. I deploy it, and then when I share a link to it on Twitter, let's say I tweet that link out, please fund my research. Any user who sees that tweet, if they have this experience enabled, and there's a growing user base of folks who do, what happens is, let's say I've enabled this feature through my Phantom Chrome extension. You can go into your settings and turn on this feature. The Blinks SDK, the front end thing, detects that a URL conforms to a specific scheme, which we can also explain a little bit more about. But when a URL is detected to be a blink, calls are made by the client, Phantom in this case, to fetch that data, get the data back according to the specification. And then what it does is it unfurls using client-side libraries. And so it unfurls to be the full image, title, description, optional buttons, input fields, all of that. So all of the UI rendering is being done by the wallet in this case, using SDKs that we make freely available at Dialect. And that means that you're getting this standardized experience. You're not necessarily getting like fully custom-made UIs from every team. And that's good for, time to developer success for developers. It's also good for safety and security purposes, a lot of other things.
Sure.
But the result of that is just like an explosion of actions that have been created because they're so easy to build. We've been told so many times by actions providers that one of the things they love about it is how quickly they can get up and running without having to build whole new UIs.
What's nice about that too is since the application, if you're building a traditional Web3 application, you'd be doing all that stuff in JavaScript to construct the transaction and all that sort of stuff. You can just take that and like copy paste it into your API server and return it as part of the action API. And now you can use that in the DApp as well. And so you can serve both the Blink and your own DApp using the same API.
Yeah. So if I'm going to Twitter and I see a Blink, what is the handshake like? What is my client sending out? What is it getting back? What information about me is going out? Like, how customizable is that experience before I've necessarily interacted with it? Just that render that appears to me initially.
So it's opt-in for every wallet right now. So you turn the feature on, so you're opting into that. And then the calls that are made pull back this initial JSON data that helps render the interface in terms of the actions. And you choose which wallet you want to, Backpack, Phantom, Soulflare, a bunch of others. And all of those calls, actually, from a privacy perspective, is probably good to call out. All of those network calls to all of these third-party actions providers are made through a proxy service, whether it's Dialect service or Phantom or Soulflare's. Like, it's all making sure that your IP address and other information about you is being protected. So you're only engaging directly with the brand, such as Phantom or Dialect.
Right. Who you already trust anyway, considering they're running your hot wallet.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And then by the time that you have that interface served to you, when you tap one of these buttons, let's say you fill in, I want to donate 1 Sol to Alice, crypto researcher. And when you hit submit, it's making a similar call to the same API that, like Jon was saying, returns a transaction ready for you to sign. And then just like any normal Web3 dApp, that transaction is now being submitted to your Chrome extension. So they really truly are like orthogonal, independent features being provided by your Chrome extension. By the time that transaction is being handed to the Chrome extension, it's just like the information and transaction flow for any other Web3 dApp. And then it's in your Chrome extension. You can see the simulation. You can gain confidence in what you're about to do, and then you sign.
Yep.
I had a couple things there. So the thing that you see when you're scrolling through is completely anonymous today. So in this case, no one knows that you're scrolling through your feed. The thing you get is going to be the same thing that someone else would see for that same exact link. Yeah. The thing that is known, or the thing that is associated with your wallet, is when you click the button. That is a post request with one parameter, typically one parameter, which is your wallet's public key, saying, hey, I have an intention to do this. Give me back the transaction that I want to invoke. And that's the thing that's known. But yeah, the first step is all anonymous.
Yep. So there's a security model here that I don't entirely understand, but a lot of folks in the EVM landscape initially were saying, oh, aren't you worried about some form of transaction injection that could go on in this flow? And my understanding is there's something different about the way that blinks and actions work that doesn't have that vulnerability. But can you elaborate on what that is?
Yeah, so I think the critical piece here is the Actions API itself. The Actions API is hosted on a particular domain, and that domain is ultimately what's returning the transaction. So in this case, you're not injecting transactions on the client side. Like, one attack vector would be two extensions. The second extension nefariously does something with it. In this case, the wallet's responsible for making the post request to the Actions API to return back the transaction. And in a lot of cases, that Actions API is going to be the same one that you would connect to from the context of a DApp.
Yep.
So in wallets like Backpack, actually, they surface, instead of this, how when you connect to a site for the first time, it's like, hey, connect to a wallet, that sort of stuff. In this flow, that doesn't quite apply because you're on X.
Yeah, you're not connecting to X.
Correct. And what you're actually connecting to is the actions provider. And Backpack will surface that flow explicitly saying, you're about to invoke an action from jupe.ag. Do you want to do this? Yes, cool, I'll do that. Then wait for the simulation and do, sign and send flow. But yeah, the trust model here is that the API provider is the one that's returning back the transaction.
Right. And this is kind of only possible because in the EVM space, the wallet is the one usually forming the transaction. But on Solana, the dApps are the ones that are actually forming the transactions.
I'm actually not familiar enough with EVM to know if that's concretely true. But yes, on the Solana side, the API can return the transaction.
And I think the mental model that way back in the Solana Pay days, in talking through this design with Jordan Sexton, the unlock for me was recognizing that structurally it's virtually identical to, ignoring, let's say, Twitter specifically, that particular manifestation, it's structurally virtually identical to how dApps deliver transactions today, which is you pull a ton of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript from a website. Somewhere in the JavaScript is when you tap this button, a transaction gets formed. So if you strip away all the HTML, CSS, all that, even the JavaScript, there's a transaction getting delivered by a URL somewhere. And here it's making it extremely minimal. And that's this portability aspect of there's a website or a URL somewhere in the world. And when I call it, it gives me a transaction.
Yep.
And it's effectively the same. Where things are different from the consumer's perspective that I think is legitimate is just what Jon was saying a moment ago, where traditionally a wallet would show the website you're on. Now we've got this decoupling of you're on a single site and you could potentially be getting transactions from a large number of different protocols.
Yeah.
And so the wallets are already mid-stride, or even I think completed in some cases, with surfacing the action URL. When you open the Chrome extension, it shows you not x.com.
Nice.
It shows you the action URL.
Awesome. So we've been talking a ton about the mobile web and sort of how this can come to other places on the web. Is there a model or a strategy for bringing this into the mobile phone? On Android, I guess it's a little bit easier, but iOS, like Safari and extensions, are pretty locked down, let alone most people interact with things like Twitter, not from the web browser, but from the mobile phone.
To me, this is the most interesting new so just even getting Twitter right, like we were saying earlier about where do we want to see this go?
Yeah.
I want to see Twitter mobile work and work in the blinks and action sense doesn't necessarily mean that you're in the Twitter native mobile app and you see something unfurl with custom abilities. That's, as far as we can tell, without a native integration with Twitter, that's not going to be possible until
without them building the libraries into the Twitter app
Which should be very clear, that's the objective, but you got to work your way.
You hear that, Elon?
Get there step by step. But the thing about, the way I love to think about blinks, actions generally, is how do you minimize the gap between a call to action and an action? And that really is speed or like wall clock time, like success. Like how quickly can I take action on something? And so the space, like there's a number of different ways that this can be done, but I think the most interesting, really clear one that has historical precedence is inside of the mobile wallet. So imagine you see a regular link preview on Twitter. It doesn't do anything fancy directly in Twitter mobile. But when you tap it, it deep links out to whichever mobile wallet you know and trust. And when I say there's some precedence here, Solana Pay, all the major wallets, you can scan a QR code. In some cases, you can tap a deep link from another mobile location, and you'll deep link over into the wallet, and a sheet will open. And blinks are as good or better a candidate for this kind of flow, where in a way it's like historically we would connect our wallets to dApps, which there's a lot of mobile difficulties today with that. Now it's almost like you're connecting your dApp to your wallet or connecting the dApp to your wallet. And I think it's just an incredibly cool design space. It to me could be nearly as fast, and in some ways maybe even faster than Chrome extension experiences on web, just by virtue of how convenient mobile is.
Interesting.
And that's just one design space. The point, though, being that like there's a lot of work that needs to be done to get to a comparably fast and seamless and immersive experience. There's also interesting stuff that can be done potentially with app clips. I don't know if you know what iOS app clips are. Yeah, I feel like they're like they're the QR codes of the 2020s. Like nobody was using QR codes for like all the 2010s. Now they're everywhere. And I think app clips are this like other unsung hero that we can't wait to see. But yeah, interesting design space, John. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of cool integration paths that I see. Widgets are another obvious surface point where not even a mobile wallet, but even if it was deeply into some, I don't know, like a Web 2 payments and loyalty application or something like that, having a button that lets you do a thing on the other side without having to integrate those SDKs means that, your protocol can make upgrades. You don't have to deal with upgrading packages and SDKs and things like that. But it also means that applications, wallets included, may not need a dApp browser, right? That's the fallback method through which transactions are constructed. But now you can have a deposit to Camino button widget, right from your banking application. And so it just, again, reduces that time to integration, also reduces the time to action.
We're also seeing a decent amount of like teams that are building net new mobile first experiences, like SocialFi use cases, who just want to make sure that they support blinks like out of the box. Like it's just a better link preview. So there's a lot of really cool things going on there. And just to double click on one of the things John said there, it's not just for this deep linking experience. Quite a few of the biggest mobile teams are exploring what's our blink strategy? Like how do we surface these in other discoverable ways? And the Explorer tab, I think, is interesting to a lot of teams. And we're keen to see a lot of that.
It must be kind of cool to like launch a product feature and people be like, what's my strategy for this? Right? Like you've launched something compelling enough that people feel like you have to develop a strategy for it.
And we're hearing through some rumors that some very big household names are actually like been asking the same question. So one, I mean, the thing I love is launching something and seeing developers who want to build with it.
And
actually, I don't know if we mentioned this earlier on the call, but like, we launched with, I think, almost 10 actions providers like Jupyter, Meteora, Tensor, Sanctum, Helium, like a bunch of our favorite teams on Solana. We launched with Phantom and Backpack. Since then, there are now 5 supporting wallets today as Chrome extensions, with some mobile experiences coming soon. The stat, though, that I want to mention, John's already smiling, is, John, you'd set this goal of like, let's do 10 actions for launch and 100 by breakpoint. And I think within a week we were at 100. We're now over I think in terms of officially submitted or registered, we're at like 260. And it probably in terms of total built, it's over 300. And so it's like unbelievable. Like incredible. Yeah, people want to build with this.
So I want to go on one piece you said there was submitted and registered.
Oh, yeah.
What is the registration system and how does it play into this?
So for those in the audience who don't know this, and this is a very natural extension of this security question, now that we've talked a little bit around the structure and the design here, I'm just going to state this all very explicitly because I think this is a really interesting problem space that we're trying to solve right now at Solana, at Dialect, and with a bunch of the wallets. as it stands today, just rehashing briefly, like by the time you're taking an action, the transaction is ending up in your Chrome extension and getting simulated and served to you and submitted to the blockchain, all the normal rails, with a couple small details that are getting ironed out, but effectively it's the same. What we all realized, though, before launch was there is a really massive consumer difference, which I mentioned briefly earlier, that now you're on a single website and potentially seeing transactions from a bunch of different projects, protocols, brands, like you're scrolling X. So we all like came to the pretty strong conclusion that like when given the opportunity, people will like click things. That's what they like to do in crypto. So we added an additional, not meant to be a replacement, but an additional layer of sort of like checks on top of this. And this is the Blinks registry. And as it stands today, if you're a developer and you want to get your Blink delivered on Twitter and rendered by the wallets, you have to submit to this registry and go through a kind of application process. And it has less to do, again, with sort of like the on-the-fly transaction simulations and all the best security practices that we have today in traditional transaction flows, because those are already implemented. And a little more to do with just making sure we try to keep like a high bar for the experience around like what is being delivered on Twitter today. And this is not meant to be a long-term solution. It's more a temporary one as we roll out a very different interaction mode for crypto.
So over the long term, how do you, like, we've all been scrolling through Twitter and we see the, like, Elon Musk is giving away Bitcoin. Send 1 Bitcoin to this address and he'll send you 2 back. And, like, you've been in crypto more than 30 seconds, you know it's a scam. But, like, a lot of people fall for that stuff. A lot of people send money around for these sorts of things. So, like, how do you deal with that problem over the long term of, like, you know, JUP.AY instead of AG, creating a blink and popping it up? Like we have this problem on websites already where there's like fake Uniswap clones up the wazoo, but they're a little bit easier to detect because usually like the certificate won't match, or, you know, there's some things we're used to. Like spotting a fake website's like a thing people are used to, but the same way that like people are really bad at seeing like what is an AI faked video now.
Yeah.
And like, especially a few months ago, they're getting better now, but like there's a social learning curve to all this stuff. What is the social learning curve for the security model for Blinks?
I mean, I think the very brief answer I would give here is these are not problems that are specific to Blinks.
Sure,
and
totally.
This is one of my actual favorite thing that's happened since launch is realizing there are so many things that we've known for years that are the problems, or even solutions that we know would really help, just crypto in general, like ideas we've had going all the way back to like 2017, 2018, 2019. And the fun thing about Blinks is they're such a new interaction mode that they're sort of shaking us by the shoulders and reminding us, hey, there's all these things we should be doing generally. And the answer I would give here is like with a lot of these fake sites, there are very talented teams focused 100% on security that are providers to all the major wallets and whatnot. I can mention we're working most closely with Blowfish, and I think bringing them more and more into the loop in terms of what you see directly, like Blowfish will, or let's say Phantom as supported by Blowfish and other providers, will just straight up like not let you sign with like big red warnings and all that in the traditional dApp flow, and seeing more of that brought directly to the experience on Twitter could certainly help.
Yes.
Yeah, I think bringing a lot of that technology like alongside Blinks and going a step beyond.
I think in the future, I want people to be a little bit more creative about how they approach the user experience for this. So getting a, fake site getting unfurled does feel like it has a little bit more trust associated with it. I can imagine a few different flows where maybe a Phantom wallet says, look, there's a risk off version of this setting where, most things get unfurled, but only if you've ever gone to that website before. They know if you've connected to jupe.ag, therefore all things from jupe.ag probably okay to unfurl, but something that they haven't visited, probably not okay, right?
Interesting.
There's other things too, like working on a few new specifications. One is like message signing. So message signing is a lot less risky. You're sort of specifying that you're the owner of something, which allows you to interact. And so maybe DApps are a little bit more amenable to that flow for collecting airdrops or other things that don't require an actual transaction.
Right, or something like there's a Blink here, but you've never connected to it. would you like to opt to engage with this Blink?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think there's a mode there where you can have that be personalized.
Yeah.
And so it opens up new things. But yeah, absolutely. Like I'm imagining like the link preview kind of like peeling back. Like there is, peel off the
Right.
yogurt label or something like that is an interesting modality to opt into those things and understand that you might be in new waters. And then ultimately, like I think that there has to exist a stricter standard or specification around how to interact with unknown transactions and programs and things like that. On Solana, there's a few mechanisms you could do. You could say like, look, we only use burner wallets for everything. Like every single interaction is a burner wallet, and you explicitly approve or delegate the balance of tokens that's needed. That necessitates some sort of standard around identity to say like all these burners are my burners, so you can
Right.
figure out token gates, but then you're not risking your assets. All of these things are on the table for sure, and I actually want to some degree we're speedrunning it a little bit to like get people to think really hard about what would it need to be true for you to be able to just like click on arbitrary things and not risk your sort of like funds and identity. So yeah, it's been interesting exploring all those spaces.
And I think they're all generally like we can send them back to crypto generally. Like Blinks are sort of forcing us to revisit a lot of these conversations. I also like last piece of this puzzle, like I think a lot of the stuff around burner wallets, all that is just fantastic, and we're really excited to see it. The last one is like decentralizing and giving to the community, like upgrading security by making it more something that the community does together. And I think Blinks being inherently social on Twitter make that a really fascinating problem space. And I think not to replace any existing security best practices, but to add to them better understanding of like, not only have I engaged with this, but who else has. I think it's just really interesting, fascinating design space.
Nice. So you mentioned this is all an open spec. If folks have gotten excited and are wanting to do more than just build a Blink and an action, but actually start contributing and helping to figure out what does this look like on YouTube? What does this look like on Wikipedia? How do we add new functionality to it? What's the right way for folks to get involved in the project?
Yeah, great question. So we've already seen the spec grow since launch to allow for some of these dynamic inputs and parameters that are ultimately provided by the user. That's what you see. You might see like, hey, enter your email address or enter, how many of a thing that you want to do. Beyond that, though, there's a couple of things that people should know, and then I'll talk a little bit about like how you actually contribute. So, having more complex input types, so like select boxes, things like that is one new specification coming out. Another one is around message signing, so being able to effectively opt into certain things. There's another one around action chaining that just got merged recently. And that allows you to take one action and then another one and another one, and allow for each to know about the previous one, which is pretty cool. And all of these ultimately start with SRFCs. If you look at the Solana forum, you'll see people submitting SRFCs there. There's also a GitHub where the action spec lives. And across the two places, you have a conversation around what exactly you're trying to do. We've had a lot of conversations, both with Dialect and folks at the Solana Foundation, as well as many folks in the ecosystem around driving the different parameters of each of these specifications to understand what's actually needed, right? Mm-hmm. There's, some thoughts around like, hey, like, do you want to maximize flexibility? Do we want to maximize pragmatism and practicality? Solana is very much a pragmatic place. So we like try and get for the minimal viable like thing that will get us unblocked, right? We want to build new cool products. We also don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot. So like, let's get something out there and work it that way. We're looking to formalize this process as we go. We want to make sure that all the stakeholders involved are, at least looking at these things. So wallets, action providers, that sort of stuff. But the best parts of the new specs came from actual ecosystem contributors like Spaceman Dev being like, I need this to build games. Here's how I need this. Great. Yeah. Have a conversation with them, iron it out, and put it up for discussion.
Yeah, like if you're interested in this problem space, like please get involved. Like what we launched, we honestly thought was going to be like an MVP. We had no idea it was going to go as well as it did. And there's just like tremendous built up demand for new experiences. And so we intend to and are excited to continue to evolve the spec.
Nice. What are your two favorite uses of Blinks that you've seen out in the wild today? John, I'm going to start with you.
Yes. because I don't know. I think maybe you're gonna also pick this one, but
Just go for it.
the Baxis one I think has
so
been the
good.
most has been the
It's
best
so
one.
good.
I think it's twofold here. Like,
Sorry, what was the Baxis one?
oh yeah, so the Baxis Blink, they had a limited edition run of a particular bottle. There's a whole story, but it's associated with the Lehman Brothers collapse. But 500 bottles, and the only way you could obtain this bottle was via Blinks. And what was cool about it was twofold. One is that they had the opportunity to tell this rich story about what you were about to interact with. Two, you had to use a wallet and you had to buy with USDC. But three, and the most critical piece, was that you bought an NFT. It wasn't this like, hey, like, pull in all this shipping address and like do all this stuff. I mean, ultimately, like it's a release that's happening later, but the point is you have this NFT that you can then redeem for the ultimate delivery of the purchase, or you can put it on their marketplace. But the speed to get, the thing done was incredible, and the actual asset was incredibly valuable. And so if you look at that tweet today, you'll see all the replies are people's screenshots of their receipts, which is like pretty incredible social proof.
Yeah.
I would say there's a better way to do it. I want them to post another Blink that, it's a unique Blink that is their receipt, to saying, hey, I bought this, get a referral, like that sort of stuff. Anyway.
Nice.
But the idea here being that NFT like just dramatically sped this thing to market. I think Todd from Baxis put out a tweet on like a Friday and had this thing live by Monday.
It was just a few days after launch.
Just a few days after launch. They sold something like 375 bottles in the first few weeks, which is, an incredible amount of commerce, something like $70,000 to $80,000 worth of commerce that they were able to get. And so anyway, it's my best example because I thought it was that e-commerce thing is just so obvious, and they executed it really well.
It's really like the trifecta. I'll give another example, but I just like, and the fact that there was no website, like this is another incredible thing. It was either you saw the Blink if you had the feature enabled, or you went and turned it on. I'm sure a ton of people enabled the feature with this particular Blink, but then it's also using what we call an interstitial or pop-up site for Blinks, which is, imagine, as we were talking about before, there's no UI development. It's all pure API. So if you're just like just getting started as a developer, you don't have a website, you don't have an app, or you want to just ship an experience real quick, because Baxis is like a venture-backed, like successful Solana startup, and they just wanted to have this totally new experience. They wanted to get out the door as quickly as possible. So you can use interstitial sites. Ours is one of the most popular right now. It's Dial.2. And if you're an actions developer, you can go to this site, drop your action URL, and it's almost like Stripe checkout, but for any action you'd want to take on the blockchain, like really clean, standardized experience, unfurls the Blink in like a web native view. So I think a ton of the traffic was people tapping from mobile, or
like one of those Instagram e-commerce things where it's not like a full website.
Yeah,
it's
and like Stripe checkout, like I know it's like checkout.stripe.com.
Yeah.
As like a small business, you can share one of those with someone, having never written a website or anything, just like configure it from your dashboard.
Nice.
It's like kind of like that conceptually, but just any action that you'd want to take beyond just like credit card payments. But then, so anyone on Twitter Mobile who didn't have the feature installed, they were like landing on this website, Dial.2, with just the Baxis, like, buy this whiskey. And then the other, I think, really strong success of this onboarding was Jon actually opened this PR to our Dial.2 website to add a mobile-friendly Connect wallet that works in Safari browser and all that, and that's TipLink's Connect wallet.
Nice.
So it's just this like step after step after step of like bringing great technology and great products from across the ecosystem into one journey.
Excellent.
Yeah. That was a lot, so maybe we'll leave it at that. There's so many interesting use cases. We've seen teams launch like basically didn't exist. They're like 100% Blinks dedicated, and they've done incredible like record-setting engagement on like mints and trading volume and all this other stuff. So it's been amazing to see.
Awesome.
I will say that there is much more to explore. I think we've seen like 80% of the things that not 80%, maybe too high, but a lot of them are just donation links. It's like, cool, great.
Right.
Please donate to me. Cool. Everyone wants that. But like, how do you really tie into the fact that this is an on-chain action, that you have access to this information in an API? The social proof it has multiple levels. The first level is like saying, Jogo did this really well, where there was betting on the Euros, and you could see how many people bet on each of the options. Cool. The next step is, okay, not just 20,000 people, but like 300 mad lads did this. And as a result of doing that, you have your own like Mad Lads Blink, and then like this, this ability to use the on-chain social graph as clues as to like what that social proof is pretty incredible. I think Chris mentioned this too. It's like you can also see how much money is in these wallets, and so you can kind of see like of what kinds of people are interacting with things is pretty cool too.
Yeah, like they're very single player today. There's a little bit of beginnings of like seeing the social proof there. And that's another thing that's like inherent in some of the spec changes Jon was describing earlier, but also things that we want to see moving forward is like, how do you make like, it's like this flat piece of cardboard sitting on Twitter today, and I want it to be like alive so you can really feel engagement.
You could do like classic like social commerce stuff too, where it's like, if you get 100 Mad Lads to buy this thing, the price goes down, right? These are like classic group buy or you can even do like petitions through Blinks for signing, like I support this thing.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting design space.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
Well, Jon, Chris, thanks for coming on and talking to us about Blinks and actions.
Thanks for having us.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Austin. It was great to be here.
Thanks.